what you want, when you want it, where you want it. This is The Mesh.
Hello and welcome to Stepping Up Service. I am Alan Jackson with the Jackson Group, a survey services and consulting firm located in Western North Carolina. And with me, as always, is Ed Gagnon with Customer Service Solutions. Ed, how are you doing?
I'm doing great today, Alan. How are you feeling today?
Doing just fine. Feeling pretty good. And glad to have you with us again on another episode of Stepping Up Service. For those of you who have not listened to the show before or are not familiar with what we're doing here, we're spending a lot of time each month talking about the world of customer service. We're talking about how we interact with people, how we handle our clients' and customers' needs, and different ways to not only do that better, but also adapt to that in an ever-changing business world. Now, Ed, as I look back at some of our previous episodes, even going back to maybe one of our first early ones, the idea of customer service, I think we've even talked about this, that a lot of people perceive it as a very soft skills, soft type of mentality where it's all about the niceties. It's all about just being nice to people and doing some simple, friendly things. But, I got to think there's a little bit more to customer service for a lot of business owners out there than just it just being the nice, warm and fuzzies and the real soft things that it can do for a business. Am I right on that?
Yeah, you're definitely right on that, Alan. I know a lot of people, when they think customer service, they think about those warm fuzzies you were talking about. It's the smile, it's the eye contact, it's the please, it's the thank you. And those things are important, but the reason why they're important is not just because we all need to be altruistic. We all need to just treat each other kindly. It's because there is a business benefit to good customer service. And a lot of people, when they think about the business benefit, they think, well, it's return business, that there's a certain percentage of customers that are going to return if they're treated well. That's the loyalty piece. Or maybe it's the word of mouth that you get with great customer service, where somebody has a great experience, they tell some friends, they tell their buddies, they tell their family, etc. And there was actually a study that came out from Bain & Company, a worldwide business consulting firm, and this is retail focused, but it applies to virtually any kind of industry. And they focused a lot on how the average purchase value can increase based on how you're interacting with the customer. So in other words, that conversation you're having, that moment of truth where you're face to face with the customer, if you handle it in the appropriate way, typically, on average, customers are going to purchase about 50% more items than they would have otherwise.
Wow. Okay, so what you're saying to me is, I've always thought of customer service like you described, more in that idea of it's just getting those customers to come back next time they need to buy something. But you're actually saying from this research and the study that there's a good chance that what they actually buy in pure dollars during that interaction could be higher if they're given a good customer service experience.
That's exactly right. So there is that longer-term benefit of repeat business, but if you handle certain things in the right way and you avoid certain missteps that a lot of people tend to do when they're interacting with customers, you can actually not only have a purchase made, but you, through the course of that conversation, can actually get the customer to buy more products, more services from you.
Okay, well, I think I'm guessing right now that the ears all just perked up of a lot of business owners or people really heavily involved, maybe a lot of CFOs out there hearing that, okay, wait a minute, so improving customer service may mean that we actually see higher sales in that actual interaction as opposed to just getting those customers to come back next time they need something. So.
That's right. I mean, customer service isn't just about serving for the sake of serving. There is a financial benefit to providing great customer service.
Wow, interesting. Well, so I know we spent a lot of time in our other episodes talking about some different nuanced elements of customer service, but to me, this sounds like this is really a situation. I think you mentioned even a second ago the phrase, maybe kind of that moment of truth or that one-to-one encounter where you've got them, you're talking to a customer or a client, and you're trying to work with them in a customer service mentality. This is that moment where that opportunity for the sale could increase, right? So this is where it becomes really critical to make sure we know what to do, what not to do, to make sure we make that encounter as positive as possible so the dollar impact will be there.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Alan. So in these conversations, when you're with the customer, you have certain things you want to do, certain things you want to avoid. And And we're actually going to walk through some of those today. I might start with some of the don'ts. But yeah, there are certain things that you want to make sure you and your employees are looking to do and looking not to do to make sure that you are getting the financial benefit from that interaction.
And again, just to remind everybody, we're talking about that, like Ed just said, that true financial impact in a customer service experience. So it's not just what percentage of our customers come back, for future purchases. This is truly trying to impact the actual dollar impact of that encounter at that one time, which that concept's still I'm still trying to wrap my head around how exciting that could be for a lot of businesses to really focus those energies on the kind of things we're going to talk about doing, with the understanding that there could be that dollar impact fairly immediately, as opposed to something that you're building up for longevity and repeat business. So very interesting. So let's go ahead and cover some of those.
They care more about the...
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, a lot of organizations, they do care about that short-term impact. They do care about that immediate gratification. And from the employee's perspective, they want to know if you're going to train me in customer service, if I'm expected to interact with customers in a certain way, that there is going to be some benefit in doing it. So we're actually going to go through why don't we start with some things not to do when you're in front of the customer? And just to kind of make it a little extra interesting, we'll use some different analogies. We'll use political analogies, and hopefully we won't ruffle too many feathers there. And then entertainment analogies. And obviously politics to some extent is entertainment.
Well,
hopefully this will work well together.
I was going to say, it sounds like you're talking about the same two industries here to me. So
and I just voted these days.
I just voted yesterday, so politics are fresh on the brain. So this will be good timing on that. So great.
Okay.
All right.
That's great.
Well, go ahead and let's hit some of the don'ts then. What do you want to start us off with?
Okay. Well, when you're face to face with that customer, or you're on the phone with the customer, the first don't is don't script. Unless you can really ensure that all your staff are going to sound sincere, the script can often hurt more than it helps. I mean, let's come up with a political analogy. You've probably heard Democrats use the script. They need to pay their fair share.
Okay. Yes.
They have this standard statement they always talk about when it deals with taxes. Well, if the customer is the voter, and the customer was having an interaction with somebody who says, these folks, whoever they are, they need to pay their fair share. Well, what is a fair share? Is it 20% of their income? Is it 50% of their income? Is it 70% of their income? Does that include Social Security, Medicare, state taxes, sales taxes? I mean, most politicians haven't thought that far ahead. Or think about Republicans. Republicans often say, we believe in small government.
Right.
Well, the federal government last year had a $3.6 trillion budget. So are Republicans saying that they believe in a $3.2 trillion budget?
Right.
I mean, is that small government? So if they got pushed on that question, well, what exactly is small? Are you saying $3.2 trillion is small? It's one of those things where if the employee uses a script, they say these certain statements. If the customer who doesn't know the script, if the customer comes back with questions that divert from the script and really try to hone in on what the real issue or need or response might be, then things can break down because the customers don't know the scripts, and therefore the employee's comfort level is going to shut down. So try to avoid scripts. Try to avoid just saying rote points, because if that's what the focus is, then a lot of these conversations could get difficult in a hurry.
So is the idea, Ed, there that, like you're saying, if someone just only knows a script and they focus on that script and that's really what they rely on, they're not always going to be as knowledgeable about the facts and the information behind that script. And that's going to come out and that's going to look bad. So people who depend on those scripts and rely on them and use them and can't express them naturally are going to find themselves getting stuck sometimes in conversations. And that's ultimately going to look bad and be very visible to the customer.
That's exactly right. You want to make sure that you're going to come across very comfortable, very confident, very knowledgeable. And saying a script is one thing, but to come across comfortable, confident, and knowledgeable, you need to be able to respond effectively to those requests that are coming in, to those needs that are coming in, to those issues that are coming in.
Now, is it fair to say that some organizations, I've been to some places or seen some organizations where I feel like everybody on board at that place has a certain way of saying something back in a very customer-friendly manner.
Sure.
But I think what you're telling me is that it's not that don't ever script. It's don't script unless you can make it meaningful, unless you can really sound like you mean what you're saying, and it's not just something that you're just kind of forced to say like a robot.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, think about Chick-fil-A, for example. For anybody who's familiar with the restaurant Chick-fil-A, it's a fast food restaurant, and they have this catchphrase, you could call it a script, that says, "My pleasure." And it seems like whenever you go through the drive-thru and you thank them for the order, they say, "My pleasure." It sounds sincere. It sounds like it really is their pleasure to serve you, and that's important. It's not just them saying the phrase. It's something that's obviously part of their culture, something that truly is part of who they are, so that when they say it, it sounds sincere and it comes across more positively.
I guess the simplest way to say it is that if you're going to use a script, it needs to be presented in a way that nobody listening to it ever detects it as a script.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. So basically we're saying be very, very careful. Don't script unless you can make it sound meaningful and natural.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. You want to, as they say in American Idol, make it your own.
Oh.
Yes.
Is that one of those singing shows?
Yes, it is. It's on every night. It seems like during the week, because my daughter wants to watch it every night during the week. But yes, it's one of those singing shows that a lot of people watch, and they know what they're doing to get the viewers, get the listeners, get the watchers. So yes, it's definitely an interesting form of entertainment.
Well, Ed, I only have boys at home, so pretty much if it's not a sporting event or a superhero cartoon, I don't know when things are on. So,
Yeah.
All right, well, let's move on to a second don't. So we did the don't script unless you can mean it. What's the next don't?
Well, the next don't is don't push.
Okay.
And especially when you're thinking about customer service as opposed to hardcore sales, don't push your product to the point of ignoring the needs of the person that you'd like to purchase the item. Instead, when you're in customer service mode, even if part of what you're trying to do is to sell, if you're in customer service mode, instead try to pull information from them about what their issues are, their needs are, their goals are, those things that they're trying to address. And then once you identify what those issues, needs, and goals are, you can provide the solution in the form of your product or service. And I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Happiness. It stars Will Smith. And he's actually this father. He actually becomes homeless, and he has his son with him. And he is, in the end of the story, he's a successful financial advisor. But prior to getting there, he had this, bone density scanner, and he would go to physician offices and he would try to push this scanner. He would put it on the exam table in front of the doctor and try to get him to purchase it, and he wasn't that successful, and he was living on the streets with his son for a while. But then he decided he wanted to get into finance. It was a different type of sales, and he had to do a lot of studying and learning about all the different products and services and the different requirements of somebody in finance. And he was selling investments, and it's not something as tangible as a scanner you can put on an exam table.
Sure.
And he was forced to try to uncover the needs of his customers before he suggested what products and what services and what investments to offer. And in Happiness, Will Smith was highly successful once he got away from pushing the product and started with pulling information from the customer about what their real needs and goals and issues were.
I see. Okay. So there again, it's the idea of if you go in with just, I'm going to sell this and this is the way I'm going to sell it, and I'm not going to stop until I've sold it this particular way, it's just not going to work for people. You're not going to see the sales and the revenue from it that you could experience. So it has to be where you're really listening and trying to discover those needs and adapting, I guess, as you go along as well with that too, because I can imagine you get into a conversation with a client about their needs, and it may divert you into a completely different path, but you've got to be willing to go on that path with them and not push them down the road you want them to go on.
Exactly. I was in a meeting last week with a prospective client, and we had met previously, and I came in there with a series of questions, and I was trying to get in the mindset of pulling information from him, and I had a very specific approach I wanted to take to the conversation. But as soon as I walked in, he shut the door and he started sharing reports with me and sharing information and sharing examples of what his concerns were with retention and revenue and that sort of thing. And so I let him go, I let him drive, and he actually shared the information with me. But even though I was in there to pull information from him, if I would have been pushing through my list, it would not have been nearly as effective, nearly as beneficial a conversation as it turned out to be, just because I allowed him to drive, him to share, and he did the vast majority of the talking.
Yes, great. And this is something I'll just kind of bring it to a personal side here. I know here at our business too, that's something we've been working really hard to do for so many years. Is it's not a matter of saying this is a product we have and you have to fit into this kind of mold to make this product work. It's, we may have some starting points for conversations of products and services, but I'd say half the work we do is truly based on just a client telling us this is something that would really help me, or this is something I really need, and we're shifting everything and patterning it to meet those needs. And I think that's I think it's one of the reasons we've been around since 1976. I mean, it's definitely it's worked for us. So.
Yes, and I've seen some of the survey design that you do, and I've been amazed about how much customization you all allow and offer and suggest to the clients. And it's just one of those things where, in the end, the client wants to get their need met. And the more flexible we are in addressing what the needs are, and the more open and listening oriented we are, the better chance we have of meeting those needs and maintaining those relationships down the road.
Well, I will go ahead and say that I have seen, especially even in the just last few years, I don't know if we're seeing a little bit more of a renaissance towards people wanting to be served in a more customized, flexible manner, but I have seen more companies and clients come to us, as an example, simply because they were frustrated with their previous vendor because of their lack of flexibility and willingness to listen to their needs. That's where we probably get a huge share of our business from, is people who have tried to go with a firm that, had a set path they take you down, a certain product service matrix, and you have to fit into this particular service. But after a while, that becomes very, very frustrating for a lot of people. They want something that's going to meet their needs, and you need to be the one to help meet those needs. Right.
And that's interesting because a lot of times when people care more about how to use the information than they care more about what is the content of that survey, what is the content of that intelligence I'm trying to gather on my customers. And a lot of what's going on in different industries, whether it's healthcare with some government mandated surveys and the impact on reimbursement, or with just a down economy and it's a situation where companies don't have the long waiting list of customers to backfill the ones that had left, where retention is that much more important. The more important it is to get good information, the more, because of the impact on the bottom line, the more focused businesses are on saying, well, let me figure out what kind of information I really need. Let me ask just these specific questions and not these other questions. And the more they hone in on trying to get some kind of a customized solution that's going to really help them in the end improve their business.
Absolutely. I completely agree. Okay, what's your third don't for us on this?
A third and final don't is don't rush.
Oh, amen.
And in society's, often frenetic pace these days, patience with a customer is one of the greatest virtues you can have in conveying that you care. And just to kind of give you a quick example of the impact it can have, I was an internal consultant at a hospital, and this is probably 15 years ago now. And Bill Clinton was president at the time, and Bill Clinton came to Charlotte. And one of the administrators of the hospital had to go meet with the president. I don't want to say had to, but she was a staunch Republican, and she was the one identified to go meet with the president as a representative of the hospital and just talk a little bit about healthcare issues and that sort of thing.
Right.
And when she came back and she met with the administrative team, and I sat in on that meeting, she said, I don't really agree with his politics, but when you're in the room with him, he made you feel important. He made you feel like you were the most important person to him at that moment in time. So this was obviously somebody, Bill Clinton, who didn't just shake hands with you while he was looking at the next person he was about to go say hi to. When he was engaged with you, he was totally focused, he was patient, he was not in a rush, and he conveyed an individual moment of truth. So the third point is don't rush. I mean, this is an example of somebody whose political leanings were the exact opposite of the president, and yet she came away feeling very impressed, and such as this president really cared about me as an individual, and he came across strongly. So you can overcome a lot of negatives by conveying patience and conveying that you care. Don't rush is the third don't.
Well, and this is a huge one for me as well. I'm notoriously sour on salespeople or somebody's trying to sell a service to me if they're pushy and trying to rush things.
Yes.
Because at that point, I don't like working under fast pressure like that all the time. I don't like making decisions under rush pressure. I've gotten burned a lot by making decisions under rush pressure in the past. So I'm really determined not to do it again. So when you've got a salesperson trying to sell me something and saying, well, I need to know this by this date, or I need to know this now, or I'm going to call you again tomorrow and find out if you're ready to go, that's an automatic turnoff. That's not going to work. And I know the mentality of the salespeople or the people doing customer service work or any of this is trying to push it quick and get the experience and encounter done quickly. Because sometimes I think they think that's what the customer wants. They think they want that the customer wants this super fast, quick process, and that's not always the case. There's some things, when you go through a drive-in line at a fast food place, yes, you do expect those to be pretty quick. But if there's a problem, even in a drive-through line, the last thing you want to do is have the staff rush you through because they're just trying to churn out these customers as quickly as possible. So it's a tough balancing act for a lot of people, but I completely agree. This is a huge turnoff for me if I feel rushed at all in a customer service or any kind of sales experience.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you're bringing that up because when we think about these three don'ts and we're talking about how you interact with a customer can impact that moment of truth, that conversation, that transaction financially, then you're talking about how if you're rushed, it might keep you from purchasing from this person or wanting to listen to them and purchase more. If we push, that turns a lot of people off. If we're pushing a product as opposed to listening and asking questions and those sorts of things, that can turn people off. That can keep them from purchasing from you. And if we're overly scripted and we sound insincere and we're so focused on the script, we're not focused on how do we respond to what the customer actually asks or what the customer needs, that can reduce our ability to actually make a sale, to maintain loyalty. So try not to script, don't push, and don't rush as well.
It's really turning that customer service experience into a much more natural, comfortable experience as opposed to something forced, scripted, and pushing them down a certain path.
Yeah, that's a great point. Natural dialogue, comfortable. You're kind of creating an environment where a great service experience, a great customer experience, and additional sales can happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. Well, we're going to take a really quick break, and when we come back, we will hit our do's as we talk about things that you should do when trying to get a good connection between the customer service experience and the bottom line, meaning you're interacting with people, what kind of things can really ultimately impact the dollars and sales that your organization can experience. We'll be right back.
We'll get back to your show in a moment. Just a reminder, you're listening to The Mesh, an online media network of shows and programs ranging from business to arts, sports to entertainment, music to community. All programs are available on the website as well as through iTunes and YouTube. Find out more at themesh.tv and give us feedback on what you like. And now, as promised, back to your show.
Hello and welcome back to Stepping Up Service. Again, I'm Alan Jackson with the Jackson Group, joined again by Ed Gagnon with Customer Service Solutions. Really quick before we go into the next part of our dialogue here, just a couple quick reminders about the Mesh and what we have going on these days. Of course, Stepping Up Service is a show on the Mesh. You can see all of the shows and learn all about the network at themesh.tv. Getting really close to our 1-year anniversary. It's been a great first year here with the network. We've got about 14 or 15 shows ongoing every month that we're putting out episodes for. So it's a lot of fun stuff. We invite you to come by and take a look and see what other shows may be of interest to you. We do have a show on leadership development and talking about the idea of leadership called Leadership GPS that comes out once a month. And for those of you in the healthcare field, which I know many of you that are listening to this Stepping Up service are in healthcare, we actually have a show very specifically about the patient satisfaction CAPS process that goes on in hospitals and home health agencies, and actually a lot of other healthcare organizations as well. That is something going on every month as well. So we encourage you to check both of those out when you have a moment. Also, if you have any questions or thoughts or ideas for us on any shows or episodes, we'd love to hear from you. You can reach us at info@themesh.tv. That's by email, info@themesh.tv. Or you can call and leave us a voicemail on our Mesh line. We listen to all the voicemails, and if we've got anything that we can either listen to or give you some feedback on, or it may be something we can play in an episode of one of our shows, the Mesh line number is 828-619-0048. So several ways to get a hold of us and let us know how we're doing and give us some ideas for future episodes or shows. All right, so with that, Ed, let's get back to our list. We had just recently hit the 3 don'ts. That, as we're talking about that moment of truth interaction where we're seeing a good customer service experience can translate to higher sales, higher dollars, greater financial impact on an organization. We talked about the 3 things that you shouldn't do in that moment of truth experience. But let's talk about the things that you do want to do and make sure that we make that connection between good customer service and the higher dollar impact for the organization. So what's your first one, Ed?
Well, the first one is do view the conversation as a sandwich. The meat is in the middle of the conversation, but you have to have that great bread surrounding it all. I mean, is there a certain kind of bread you like, Alan?
I really like croissant-style bread. So can we use that for this example? Okay, good. And I really like ham and cheese, too. So anything you can do, and I'm a little hungry because it's almost lunchtime, so anything you can do to couch that conversation.
If there's
I'm really liking where this example is going, so please continue.
Okay, great. Yes, I remember on a prior episode we talked about the Alan Jackson grocery store, so we'll have to make sure we have a good croissant section in the Alan Jackson grocery store.
Perfect. That'll be great.
But the idea here is that in a conversation, the meat is really in the middle. You have to have the great bread surrounding it. I mean, the idea is that you want to open positively and close with appreciation. The beginning, the end of that sandwich essentially needs to be very positive as well. And you want to make sure that the last opinion that the customer has is that you cared about them and appreciated them. So let me get back to these political entertainment analogies. Here's an entertainment one for you. Think about on the front end when you're thinking about the beginning of a conversation. There's a movie called Saving Private Ryan. Have you heard of that, Alan?
Oh, I don't ever watch any movies.
I'm sorry, what's that?
I don't ever watch any movies.
Oh, you don't?
No, well, except whenever I host my film podcast here on the Mesh called Foot Candle Films. But, other than that and running a film society and all that, no, I don't ever see any movies.
Okay. Well, we're way out of your wheelhouse here, I can tell.
Right, so. Yes. I'm very uncomfortable with this conversation.
Okay. But Saving Private Ryan, I mean, it starts out with a bang. It's the storming of the beaches at Normandy. A lot of it's black and white. Steven Spielberg intermixed actual footage from D-Day with the movie footage. I mean, the initial part of that movie is so intense. It gets you involved from the start. It gets you engaged from the start. It gets you hooked from the start. And in conversations, that's something you want to try to do right up front. You want to get the customer engaged. You want to show that you're engaged right up front. Now, Alan, I know you don't have a lot of experience apparently with movies, but have you ever been to a movie where you were disappointed in the ending?
Oh my gosh, that's like 75% of the movies I go to. So movies notoriously fail in the third act. So
yeah. And how do you feel at the end of that movie? You've sat through 2 hours and 75% of those end horribly. What's your feeling walking away from that?
Well, I do think it impacts your memory of that film. I mean, no matter how great the opening is, if it doesn't close with a really solid closing, that's normally the thing you talk about with your friends and family. It's like, well, just the ending wasn't really that great. And that's what sticks in your mind afterwards. So I see where you're going with this. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's exactly where I'm going. I mean, the beginning might get them engaged in a movie, but the ending leaves that last impression. And it's the same thing with a conversation. I know a lot of people, when they talk about customer service, they're always talking about you have to make a great first impression. Well, when you think about a conversation, you have to make a great first impression, but the ending leaves the last impression. The ending of that conversation is oftentimes what forms their opinion about you, about your organization. So the first do is to view the conversation as a sandwich. It's not just the meat of the conversation that's important, but you have to show you're engaged up front. You have to show you're focused up front. You have to show you're positive up front. And on the back end, you always want to make sure that they understand that you care about them, you appreciate their question, you appreciate their business. That's what takes it from being a transaction, which is the middle, to a customer service conversation where the customer really feels that you care.
Well, I guess working with that same analogy a little bit too, Ed, is, I can recall some customer service experience I've had where the meat of it, the stuff in the middle, the real detailed, more part of the interaction, maybe didn't go as well. From my perspective anyway, as a customer, maybe it wasn't the information I wanted to be hearing. Maybe I was being told that something was not possible, and we were having that dialogue. So you could almost say the meat was maybe not as good as it should have been. But I do recall that as long as the beginning and end were handled as positively and professional as possible, I still felt okay coming away from that encounter. Knowing that at times it may have gotten a little more tense and there may have been a little more frustration with me on the phone or however in person. But you're right, it's that ending is what I'm going to walk away with a little more remembrance of. And I think a lot of people forget the ending. And we think about that first impression, but we forget that we have to close out that conversation just as positively as we did opening it.
Yeah, and just like you say, a lot of people, when they're forming their opinions or they have that last impression or they just sat through 30 horrible minutes at the end of a 2-hour movie, I mean, that is what their judgment is. That is what creates the word of mouth. That is what determines whether they want to go back and see a movie a second time, whether they want to go back to your storefront a second time or not.
Well, and in the case of Saving Private Ryan, you have to sit through a really, really horrible epilogue at the end where they go back to modern day, and it was just completely unnecessary. Spielberg using a CGI technique that he shouldn't have been using. And if you want to hear me talk more about this, you have Foot Candle Films here on the Mesh you can listen to at any time. Come join us. Okay, done. I've got my movie geek part out. So anyway,
great.
Go ahead. So we'll move on to the next do. What do you have for us?
Sure. The next do is do ask questions, and I'm going to avoid the movie analogy here, because we only have a 3-hour podcast limit, so I'm going to avoid that. But basically, I mean, we do a great deal of mystery shopping here at CSS, and invariably the employees who perform best are those who ask enough questions to specifically understand that customer's unique perspective, their unique issue, their unique need. And it was interesting when we were talking earlier about one of the don't push. You mentioned that a lot of employees think they know what the customer wants. Mm-hmm. And that is just a major error that a lot of employees make, that they think they assume they know what the customer wants, and they really don't. And even if they do know what the customer wants, they should at least confirm that understanding. Ask, is this what you want? Is this what you're looking for, to make sure that they can meet the need right the first time? So the second do is do ask questions. Be inquisitive. It shouldn't be, we were talking about our kids earlier, it shouldn't be a situation like we tell the kids, you need to do this. And they say, why? Well, for this reason. Why? Well, for this reason. And all of a sudden, they're asking why 10 times and you're getting frustrated. But it's a situation where you're asking enough questions to truly figure out what is the root cause of the issue, what is the root need, and that way you can, in a very professional way, transition from that request or that issue or that need over into some kind of a solution for the customer.
It's interesting as we look at some of these do's and don'ts, and especially with this one, the asking questions, and you mentioned about some staff feeling like they always know what the customer wants. I think this is a real problem for people that just start out in a business environment in customer service or sales or something like that, where I think there's a lot of emphasis put out there on the idea that people should know already know what the customers want, and they should already be so experienced and knowledgeable about their service that I think in a way sometimes we actually create this wrong framework for these people, where the expectation is you go out there and you are so overconfident and you know your product, you know exactly what to do, that it almost creates that idea that you don't need to ask questions. You don't need to listen to the client as much. You just need to tell them what you're going to do for them. And I think that's a real problem we've got, and I think it's illustrated by some of your do's and don'ts here, is that we need to do a better job of teaching people when they join an organization that it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to listen and not feel like you've got to hit them over the head with your knowledge and experience about a situation. You really need to learn from that customer just as much as you already have learned yourself.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, Alan. I mean, like I said, the best folks in customer service, they know how to listen. They know how to ask questions. They convey the patience. They don't appear rushed. They don't push. And in the end, you might say, well, that takes a lot of time. Well, in the end, if you do a good job of listening, you do a good job of asking questions, you don't push, several things typically happen, including you have a much better chance of keeping that customer. You have a much better chance of meeting the need first time because you're inquisitive enough to truly understand what the need was and what the best solution would be. So there's a lot of efficiencies involved on the operational side. There's a lot of loyalty and repeat business involved on the revenue, the top line side as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and we'll get to my my customer service example or scenario of the week here at the end, but mine really ties in pretty tightly with that do that you just listed. So great. All right, and what's your third do for linking that interaction with financial impact on the organization?
Well, the final do, we're getting back to politics here for our analogy, but it's do paint a picture for staff of what is great customer service.
Okay.
So you do want to paint that picture of what great customer service is. And companies need to stop assuming that employees know the difference between good and great customer service. Because in order to deliver great customer service, businesses need to be very intentional about describing what it is, what it looks like, how to do it. So if you want your employees to deliver a certain level of service, they need to have this mental picture of what it is, what it looks like. And getting back to politics, this is something that was great about Ronald Reagan. Now, he would talk about America being, quote, a shining city on a hill, end quote. I mean, he painted that shining city picture as he worked through some of the mud of a horrible economy, through the difficulties of the Cold War. He talked about the future as he moved the country through some tremendous change, some hard times, and this type of future focus helps people to kind of keep moving forward toward the end goal, even if they have to get through some difficulties. So try to paint that picture of what lies down the road, what is great customer service, and what you're striving to be. And if you can paint the picture, you can create that vision, you can have your employees visualize that themselves, they have a much better chance of actually achieving great customer service because they know what it looks like, they know what it should feel like, and they know what they need to do. They begin to know what they need to do to work toward it.
So it's not just enough to go and walk into a company if you're in a leadership role and say, okay, guys, we're going to get better with customer service. I want everybody to go out there and do great customer service.
Exactly.
That just using those terms isn't telling people and painting that picture enough for people. It is like painting a picture. You've got to be very expressive with your picture. It's got to be very nuanced and have details and tell you everything in the story. And it can't just be a word or a little sign you hang up in the wall about, do great customer service today type of thing.
Exactly. Because somebody, when they say do great customer service, they might think, well, hey, I smile.
Yep.
And then somebody else might think, great customer service. You want me to be like Disney? I work in a local municipality inspecting homes and that are getting a deck added on, and I'm supposed to be like Disney performing. Are you crazy? So people have different impressions of what great customer service is, and the definition of it to some extent can be tailored to each individual company. So essentially what we're saying is that let's say you have 3 employees or you have 30 employees or you have 3,000 employees. If you just say we want to have great customer service, then those 3 or those 30 or those 3,000 employees could all have different impressions in their mind of what is great customer service. And you want to be more intentional about that because not every business might define great customer service in the same way. So if you want to get consistency, you want to get a branded way that company X delivers great customer service, you need to define what it is so that those 3 employees, those 30, those 3,000 all have a common understanding of what it is, what it looks like, what it feels like, and therefore they have a much better opportunity to really live and deliver that kind of great customer service. And from the company standpoint, if you define what great customer service looks like, you're very intentional about saying this is the desired experience for our customers, then you can start putting training and processes and systems and technology and hiring and motivation and all these other pieces in place to really deliver that level of customer service.
Well, and the example I always hear, it's a company you've already mentioned, but with Disney, hearing that idea that you could go up to any employee at a Disney World park and ask them what the mission of the organization is and what they value as an organization, and everybody knows this is on the same page. Everybody
Yes.
can say the same words with the same intent. That's that whole getting everybody on the same page, painting that picture and making sure everybody sees the picture, understands the picture, and can describe that picture to everybody else. So,
and the better you can do that, the better chance you have that everybody walking away from Disney or everybody walking away from your organization has a very common high level of experience. But if you leave it up to the 3 or the 30 or the 3,000 employees to define customer service their own way, then the customer experience is going to be based on what employee they interacted with that day.
Okay.
And if it was somebody having a bad day, if it was somebody who doesn't really understand the culture of the organization, somebody who just has their own definition of great customer service, you can have a lot of inconsistent, a lot of bad experiences out there through the customer's eyes.
right. Okay. I agree wholeheartedly with all of the do's and don'ts you gave. I think they're just so important. And, you know, some people may be listening and saying, well, this sounds like common sense. And yes, a lot of it is some common sense. But it's amazing how many people forget some of these things and just don't think about these things in terms of actual day-to-day moment of truth interactions with customers or clients. And you have to be reminding yourself, you have to be working on these things to make those experiences be as profitable and as successful for your organization as possible. So,
more individuals and in particular companies adopted these do's and don'ts, the level of customer service, the revenue received would be so much higher from these businesses. I mean, if you just think about your business or my business or any other business out there, if they were not overly scripted, if they weren't focused on pushing products, but were more focused on pulling information, if they didn't seem impatient or like they were rushing the customers, if they were better at opening and closing conversations, if they were more inquisitive, if they truly painted a very clear and intentional picture of what great customer service is, if organizations just did those 6 things, those interactions with customers on a day-to-day, hour-by-hour, minute-to-minute basis would be so much more effective, so much better at actually creating a great customer experience and generating more revenue for the company.
absolutely. Absolutely. Great. Well, we have knocked through 3 do's and 3 don'ts for linking that moment of truth interaction with financial outcomes for the organization and why they're so important to get right. So thanks so much for that, Ed. Now, we always
Sure.
wrap up our show with some customer service examples, either a bad one or a good one that we've had recently that we want to highlight. Do you have one prepared for us this month?
Yes, it's a positive one.
Okay, well, I've got a positive one too, but you know what? I'm okay. I'm feeling really good today, really positive in general. I think having 2 positive ones is going to be okay. So we're going to let this one slide today. So Ed,
As long as we don't talk about CGI at the end of Saving Private Ryan, you're going to be in a good place, right?
Oh man, I ought to make my customer service example be something about Saving Private Ryan and how they really dropped the ball customer service wise at the end of that film. So that would be interesting. But no, we'll stay positive today. So that sounds good. So you mind if I go first?
No, feel free.
Okay. Well, I am going through a wonderful process of reevaluating life insurance options and looking at options like long-term care insurance, a lot of fun things that I really hate dealing with. The 2 things that people know about me that I hate dealing with in a business environment or financial environment, one is copiers and printers and things like that. I don't like leases on copiers and trying to calculate how many pages we're going to print and what is our best deal. I don't like doing that. And the second thing is insurance. I really don't like talking about insurance, whether it be medical, life, anything. But it's one of those
I'm right
things.
there with you on both of those.
Oh
by the
gosh,
way.
I hate talking about those. And it's nothing against anybody who's in those fields. I mean, I get it. They're very, very necessary fields, but just the nuances of having to negotiate these things is very, very frustrating for me. Well, so I'm going through this whole insurance process, trying to reevaluate some things, trying to make sure I'm covered the way I need to be covered. And I'm dreading it from day one because I know this stuff is going to go way over my head. I'm going to be bombarded with numbers and options and terms that I don't understand. My experience has been less than stellar over the years with people dealing with this. But just recently, and I don't even know how I got connected with this person, but it's another representative for the company I deal with, reached out, said he wanted to come talk and just get together and talk over options. And of course, I'm rolling my eyes saying, gosh, I really don't want to sit through this again. I've gone through so many of these in the last several years. But I don't know how it worked out, but he got on my schedule. And so we got together and we talked. And he did everything, Ed, that I think you mentioned in the do's and don'ts, just in this episode here, to make this a successful experience for me.
Great.
He spoke to me in a natural tone. He, if he used the term I didn't understand, he would stop, explain it in a very simple way that I got. He talked with me about options, but he never tried to push me down any path. He never tried to say, you need this, or this is what's going to be best. It's saying, well, here's your options. Here's my suggestions, but by all means, it's whatever you feel like is a better fit for you. We'll make it happen. That's the kind of language I've been needing to hear for so many years. And he actually made the experience of signing on with insurance somewhat enjoyable, if that's possible. But he's asking the questions. He never rushed me. Even when I was the one so slack, not responding to him for so long, he would check in with me every once in a while, say, hey, just wanted to let you know I'm here if you need me, but not going to rush you. You take your time, and whenever you're ready to talk, just let me know. And that was just very much appreciated. I never felt like I was on his clock or on his schedule to get done by a certain date. He asked the right questions. He guided me down a path if I needed a guide, but if I didn't, he let me choose the path I wanted to go down. And never felt pushy, never had a scripted thing. I didn't feel like I was hearing him give a speech. I mean, he really was just having a nice dialogue with me. So already I'm sold on this particular person. I'll recommend him to all my friends. I mean, it works out great. So
that's great.
It's just a great example of the things you're talking about. I signed on with probably a little bit more service than I intended to with him because of the way he handled that interactions with me.
And that's a perfect example of the study we led this podcast off with. It's the idea that if they handle that conversation in a certain way and they do those do's and don'ts, maybe the customer will actually purchase more than they might have otherwise.
Of course, now that I just said that, I'm realizing, wow, I bought more than I probably was planning on. So maybe I need to go back and review that. But regardless, it made for a great example in that it is exactly like you were talking about. I don't think I would have signed on with some of the programs I got if it hadn't been for this person and the way they handled that service experience.
That's great.
Okay. Well, what do you got for us?
Well, mine is, believe it or not, related to a car dealership.
Ooh.
And this is the service area of a car dealership where we bought our car, actually both cars here in Charlotte several years ago. But we have gotten both of our cars onto service plans, particularly since we don't want to have to buy a new car anytime soon. And my daughter, even though she's only 12, and our newest car is about 5 years old, we would like for that newer car to be her car maybe 4 years down the road. So we have long-term plans for these cars. We're not the kind that turns them over every 2 or 3 years. And I called up yesterday to schedule service for one of the cars, and they updated me on how many services we had on each car that was still available. And the person picked up on the first ring. They were pleasant, like they are always pleasant. They were flexible with different scheduling for my appointment, different scheduling options. They told me how long it would take, and they actually gave me some information on renewing one of the service plans for one of the vehicles. And I was thinking about the fact that they are always that quick to pick up the phone. They were always that pleasant on the phone. They are always that flexible with scheduling. But when you actually show up, they're just as good. It's interesting that they almost always, I can think of maybe one or two times over 5 or 6 years where they have actually completed the service after the time that they said. The vast majority of the times they do it beforehand. They have little perks even, like a free car wash after every service. And they have Wi-Fi in the waiting area, big
nice.
screen TV, so I can get work done. And it's just one of those situations, just like yours, where this is going to be the third time that we've purchased service plans for the two cars. And believe me, if the service itself would not have been good during the first plan, we would not have purchased a second. We would definitely not be purchasing a third. We would just go in each time when we needed to, and maybe at this place or maybe a different place, and get whatever basic service we needed.
Yep.
But because of the fact that their service is so consistent, it's so good, it's such a good experience, we're going to renew again. And that's just another example of, if you deliver great customer service, additional revenues are going to flow to you.
Absolutely. Well, it's also nice to hear when you said that calling in and doing that type of interactions with them was always very positive, but it actually carried over even when you showed up in person. Everything ran smooth. I've seen so many companies where they may have the online, phone, email process down pat, but you actually get there in person and it all falls apart, or vice versa. It's nice to see an organization that's got it as a seamless process. And servicing cars, I bet you that's a tough area to get timing and scheduling all right, because I'm sure you don't always know what you're getting into sometimes when you work on a car. So anytime they can get it down to a good science and have it worked out and have all the amenities around it to make it a more enjoyable experience is always a positive for the customer. So. Yep,
and that's big money to those car dealerships. So it's great when they can retain and get people on the service plans and have them spread that good word of mouth.
Absolutely. Great. Well, we both had two positive ones to share today. So overall, we're ending on a very positive, uplifting, happy customer service mentality here. Ed, thank you so much for all the information, all the ideas. Hopefully those individuals listening, whether they're in leadership positions at an organization or staff positions, or hoping to aspire to be in a role where they can impact customer service in the future, hopefully these are some things that people can remember, that there are dollars attached to these interactions. There are ways to make actual one-to-one interactions with customers translate to higher dollars, higher revenue, higher profitability for a company simply by the way we handle that customer service experience. And there's some very, very simple, natural things we can do to make that better for everyone. So
definitely.
Great. Ed, so where can people learn more about you and customer service solutions?
The easiest way to do it is to go to our website, which is cssamerica.com. That's cssamerica.com. And you can check out the website, check us out on Twitter there, our blog, tips of the week, all sorts of different resources for them.
Great. So that's cssamerica.com.
That's correct.
Okay, great. And then and I'm with the Jackson Group, where you can learn more about us at thejacksongroup.com. That's where we do a lot of our management consulting work, leadership development, and survey work with employee and customer satisfaction surveys. So thanks to everybody for listening to Stepping Up Service this episode. We'll be back next month with another great episode with another great topic to discuss. In the meantime, visit us at The Mesh at themesh.tv to see more about not only this show. You can go back and listen to old episodes, but also to listen to other shows on the Mesh Network as well. So for Stepping Up Service, this is Alan Jackson and Ed Gagnon signing off. Take care, and we'll see you next month.
You've been listening to The Mesh, an online media network of shows and programs ranging from business to arts, sports to entertainment, music to community. All programs are available on the website as well as through iTunes and YouTube. Check us out online at themesh.tv. Discover other network shows and give us feedback on what you just heard.